Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Decision Hour. I'm Adam, and with me, I got my buddy John again this week. John, how are you?
Doing fantastic, Adam.
I love
Excellent.
it. I love it. I got to remember that we're actually on video here. Hey, listen, we are continuing the conversation. We've done 5 episodes. No, I'm sorry. We've done 7 episodes now of Let's Have a Conversation. We got another one for you today, and this one, I'm guessing this one's probably going to poke the bear a little bit. I'm guessing this one's probably going to rub some people the wrong way, and that's okay. That's what we do. That's part of this. Let's have a conversation, right? But John, why don't you tell everybody what are we talking about today?
Yeah, so what we're starting off with, the point of departure for tonight, is that the woke left in America, the ideology that has really infected the country over the past, actually several decades, as it turns out, is very, very similar to the fundamentalist Taliban ideology that we're currently seeing rise again in Afghanistan, and we're starting to see some of the horrors of that. And we got to remember that people, this is a 20-year-old war, or the 20-year-old event. And so a lot of people don't remember that the Taliban was in charge when we went in and was doing a lot of the same things that we see them doing now. They're killing people for not wearing, face coverings, killing people for being associated with certain things, going to school, being educated, those sorts of ideas. So I have made the case before, and this is a recent realization for me, and probably the past 6 months, maybe a year, but I just started to notice how the woke left, wokeism, as I call it, is a fundamentalist ideology because it displays the characteristics that fundamentalist ideologies show, whether it's ISIS or the Taliban or Muslim Brotherhood, whoever it might be. But so we got to understand just a little bit of info, just a touch of background, that we are fundamentally religious creatures. It's part of how our brain is constructed.
Right.
And so it's a natural way for us to think. And and I just simply say that the left, which used to be very much an ideology, they were fighting for economic justice. They were fighting for the little guy. They wanted to make sure that labor didn't get screwed over by management. They had an economic battle on their hands. But now it's very much a ideology, almost a religious type ideology that essentially the left is trying to push on the rest of the world. And you can be fundamental about political and social issues, as we've seen, and as I think we'll talk about here. And so some of the characteristics is they know what the right answer is as they walk into a conversation. They're committed to that answer. They're likely to get angry with anybody who argues against their right answer. They reduce everything to a single or very few causes, like the oppression arguments, right? And ultimately, it's tyrannical, and it results in mob rule, shout downs, no conversations or opposing, no opposing discussion or debate is allowed. You're simply shouted down. And they have done things like banning free speech, banning people from social media platforms, labeling people as a racist, labeling them with, as something they said is hate speech. They deny objective truth. They focus on the individual's perception of the world or their lived experience, which is the new lexicon. And as soon as their position or their argument becomes untenable, they simply change the equation. They simply change their position. And a good example of that is here recently we've seen, there was this whole my body, my choice thing with with regard to abortion, my body, my choice, right? And then all of a sudden, those same people are screaming that everybody has to get vaccinated and the my body, my choice doesn't apply in that situation. So it's very interesting. So, I've started to refer to them as the fundamental left, the authoritarian left. I view it as a fundamentalist woke ideology that's very, very similar to the Taliban's fundamentalist views, shutting down opposition. Positions aren't necessarily logical. They're not bound to objective truth, refuse to consider contrary opinions, and they brand them as heretical. They resort to militant tactics on the ground, and they're forcing their views on the larger culture. And we've seen that. We've seen these displays. You've got the BLM and the Antifa stuff forcing this ideology, by force with violence. And that's just two very, very small examples.
All right. So you have said a lot here. So I
Right.
want to go back here just a little bit, and I want to talk a little bit about. First off, you mentioned the woke left.
Right.
Where did the woke come from? Where did that exactly come from? Any idea?
I have no idea.
And what exactly is that supposed to mean? Like woke. I think of woke, and it's like, all right, people are starting to realize what's going on, but that's not what that means. Or it does, that doesn't seem like that's what it means, because we're tying it in with the left, like the woke left. Well, if the left was woke, then we wouldn't be in this issue that we're dealing with today, my opinion.
Sure. Yeah, I did ask. I've asked several people about that. The best answer I got, and I can't confirm that it's true, is that woke means that you are awakened to all the injustice in the world. Basically, it's an oppressor-oppressed thing. It's an old Marxist idea that the postmodernists twisted in the 60s.
So it's borderline victim mentality.
It's absolutely that. The world is viewed as oppressor oppressed, and you're either an oppressor or you are the oppressed.
Now, I want to ask you this question, because you said the woke left, and then you stated you mentioned the Taliban, you mentioned ISIS,
right.
You just mentioned Marxism. Are we saying that they're all the same thing?
I would.
Let me rephrase it. Let me rephrase it. Would they fall under the same umbrella, as far as like definition?
No, I think they would all fall under the fundamentalist umbrella.
Okay.
Not necessarily like I don't think the Taliban are necessarily Marxist.
Right. Okay. Fair enough.
Right.
Fair enough. So you're saying is that their ideals and their beliefs are kind of the same as in one, with some different things here and there that separate them as a group.
Implemented, I would say, implemented with very similar tactics, very similar tactics, whether it's psychological or physical.
So what do we see happening next? Like I know Afghanistan, the Taliban. You had also mentioned that before we went there in 2001, the Taliban ruled, or was the government agency, if you will, of Afghanistan. 20 years later, because when we recorded this episode, it's the month of September. This month is the 20-year anniversary of September 11th, 9/11, which drew us into Afghanistan to begin with.
Right.
Now, 20 years later, is history repeating itself?
Well, of course, that remains to be seen. We'll have to see if history repeats itself, but it kind of is. We're back. It's like Groundhog Day.
Right.
You're back at the beginning again, only this time they're much more heavily armed.
Well, that's because we gave them like Christmas came early. Oh, I'm sorry, they don't believe in Christmas. Whatever. They got you know what I mean. It was like
the day for presents.
Yeah, it was like, here, have 67 Black Hawk helicopters, have 120 armored vehicles, have thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of rounds of ammunition.
Yeah.
And it was like, let's just, I don't know. It blows my mind. John. I can't understand. I guess my question, John, is what's our ideology in doing something like this? Why would we?
So that's actually a really good question, and so here's something that I found very interesting. I have commented on this before in videos on on my channel. So we roll into we rolled into Afghanistan in a very close to fundamentalist Muslim country, very conservative. That's the word. Very conservative Muslim country. And we did things like fly the what's the rainbow flag? Fly the
The pride, yeah,
LGBTQ
whatever, yeah.
pride flag. There you go, the pride flag over our embassy. Well, that's the kind of completely tone deaf things, ethnocentristic activity that America does, that it's so ugly American. We rolled in there trying to impose our beliefs
Right.
on those people, to include, the form of government. Obviously, they didn't want it.
Yeah, but well, hold on. Let me stop you there for real quick.
Yeah,
Is it that they didn't want it, or it was their government that didn't want it? Because there was a lot of people, mind you, that benefited from us being there. A lot
sure.
of the I know a friend of mine who was an author. He was actually a Marine interpreter in Afghanistan for many years. He's a Hollywood actor now, and he was all for us being there because it helped women and children. And let's just focus on that for a second. The ideology that they had prior to us going in 2001. Women couldn't go to school. The kids were
Yep.
X, Y, and Z, whatnot. And I get that it was a different. I can't think of the word I'm looking for. It was just a different culture that they had there.
Right. Right.
The women and children alone were able to go to school once we opened all of that up. Men started thinking, okay, that's a good idea. Let's have all this, blah, 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 blah. It was kind of like, I hate to, I'm not necessarily comparing this to us here in America, but it's kind of like our government here, where they want to control the rest of the population on how to do things. You can do this, you can do that. Where, I guess, where's the difference there then? Or are we trading
Right.
one bad for another?
Yeah. So that's a good question, and I don't pretend to have an answer to
And
that,
I'm
but
not saying that we're bad. We're certainly, we have our flaws and whatnot. And I am
of course,
certainly not saying that the Taliban is good. I'm certainly not saying that. I am not saying that. Let me be clear. I'm saying the ideologies are, you have what John stated earlier about the Taliban and their ideology, and then you also have the United States. And John just mentioned we go in with our ideology, right? And we try to change things up to fit our ideology because we think that that's going to be better. And for the most
right.
part, for the last 20 years, we did a lot of great things there. Um, that a lot of people loved us for, right? But now you look at it and it was like, was it all for naught? And I don't think it is. And I know we have a lot of veterans that listen to this show, and I'm certainly not saying that it was for naught. I'm not saying that.
Sure. I
But
mean,
you got to ask
so
that
I have a
question, though.
very
You have to ask that question.
yeah, you do. I think it bears asking. I know what my personal answer is, and I even put it out in a message, what I call a message to Afghanistan veterans. And maybe it's the professional warrior in me, but from a personal perspective, it was never about somehow conquering Afghanistan. It was about going over there and doing my job and serving with the finest Americans,
Right.
ever. That was it was almost like it was almost like, it was an end in itself for me personally. Uh, yeah, so I know I'm probably, I guess, a little unique in that perspective. I don't struggle. Okay, so you and I talked about it. I didn't sleep for a week after the initial disaster in Afghanistan.
Right.
I didn't sleep for a week. And a lot of my friends, I was contacting guys who, guys who I don't talk to every day. And they're texting me, and everybody had the same issue. And all my friends at work here, of course, everybody's a veteran. Everybody was all kind of twisted up about it. Um, but I don't dwell on it and think about was it all for naught. Uh, I just don't. It's weird. I don't. I haven't thought about that. I know a lot of other people are though.
All right.
I know a
So
lot of other people are.
let's go back to the ideology
Sure.
side of this here, and we're bring it back into the ideology, and it all ties in together for the most part. But we're comparing the woke left to the current Taliban in Afghanistan now.
Yeah.
And that we're saying, and correct me if I'm wrong, but we're saying that the ideologies between the two are the same.
We're saying that the methods are the same.
Methods are the same. I'm sorry.
They have many of the same characteristics.
So what happens now then?
Well, so let's look at what we've seen. All right. And this is going to get to some of what we were talking about before we started recording. So do you remember, it was a couple of years ago now, but there was a tactic that was being used in Northern Virginia for sure, Northern Virginia and DC area, where BLM and Antifa people would confront white people in restaurants and on the street, and they would surround them and they would scream and yell at them, trying to get them to take a knee, trying to get them to.
They were provoking them.
Definitely provoking them. I saw this one video that was on the news that was really pitiful. It was really despicable. This poor lady was surrounded in a restaurant and was just getting verbally pummeled, and she was terrified and had no opportunity to defend herself or anything. And she just happened to be there eating lunch or something, and she happened to be a white woman and got surrounded by a bunch of wokesters who, probably all live in like Loudoun County, Virginia or something. And they were just screaming and yelling at her. It was crazy, absolutely nuts. But yeah, so what's going to happen? I don't know. That's one example of what's already happened. We've seen the Antifa and the BLM riots happening.
I thought those were peaceful protests.
Oh yeah, they are mostly peaceful. Sure. Yeah, they were mostly peaceful. Kind of like that was a mostly successful exit from Afghanistan. But but in all seriousness,
yeah,
what does come left, or next from the left? They've taken control of the government. I hate to say this, but it's almost a good thing that this disaster happened, because it kind of put them back on their heels a little bit. But
let's talk about that for a second.
Sure.
With the woke ideology and this happening, do you think more people are becoming woke and realizing what's going on? Meaning that this had to happen in order for us to pivot and make a change for the good of our future. And that's a lot to really, there's a lot there in itself, right?
Here's how I've put it over the past couple of weeks. I have said something akin to the following: that Americans have had the opportunity to look behind the curtain and see that the terrifying big wizard they're seeing on the screen that's presented to them is not only not terrifying, but he's a pitiful excuse for a, you know, for a man. He's nothing like what is being projected. And they've if they are listening and if their eyes are open, which I think a lot of people's are, they're looking at this whole event that's happened with Afghanistan, and they've realized all these experts that have all these degrees from fancy places that suck the intelligence out of your head, all these so-called experts are idiots, right? I mean, the average American is looking at them and going, you guys are idiots. So they've lost tremendous credibility. The government has lost tremendous credibility with that. And so that alone is a huge, I think, a huge step to stop deferring to the Fauci's and, you know, guys got like, well, a lot of the people that are in the current administration holding pretty key billets, you know, winking deer in the headlights, Blinken, Secretary of State. You know, that's an example of a guy who's just so obviously in over his head.
Right.
It's crazy. And yeah, anyway.
No, we're now you're getting into what I think is the our ideology here as government, at least with this current administration, because that's what we've said. But I think it's just more than the administration. I think there's a lot of people that are involved in it that are just lining their pockets, and that's my own opinion.
You know what though? That so first of all, I don't dispute that. There is always money changing hands, right? Somebody is getting, but somebody's getting something.
But that's like saying, John, everybody has a price.
Exactly.
Right? Okay, so what's your price? What's our price then to change our ideology?
Oh, well. You mean like payoff price? How much money would cause somebody to change their ideology?
Here, how much money is it to change your ideology, or how much money do you need to turn your cheek?
Right.
And not see our ideology and what we're doing.
That's an interesting question. I've not really thought about that. Well, so a congressman.
Let me interrupt you real quick.
Yeah.
So, in doing that, how many people that are not only this is for you listeners out there. Think about what that price would be. And hopefully a lot of you think, well, you know, I can't be bought. Great. Put yourselves in these politicians' positions where they have to do so much and make so many promises to so many people that are their supporters, that are funding their political campaigns and yada, yada, yada. And somebody comes in with a very substantial amount of money and says, I'm going to give you this money, and I want you to just go ahead and turn your head. Don't look. You're not doing anything wrong. You're just turning your head. We're not asking you to believe in our ideologies. We're just asking you to turn your head and not look at what we're doing. Same thing can be said about the Taliban. Taliban does it. ISIS does it. They do it in Africa, right? They go into these small communities, you know, these tribal leaders and whatnot. Hey, here's a bunch of money. Don't go past that sand berm right there.
Right.
That's it. We'll keep feeding you. We'll make sure that you have food and whatnot. Meanwhile, Taliban or ISIS, whatnot, they have training camps out in the middle of the desert in Africa. And this is not a secret. This is all found on the internet, folks. I'm not saying anything that I shouldn't be. But they have gone in and they pay these people to turn their head. It's the same thing that's going on here in America.
Yeah. Yeah. So what's the price? I think every individual would have certainly a certain price. And I think there's very few individuals, particularly in the crowd that's in DC now, that are unable to be bought. and half of those individuals are probably already totally bought and
Right.
can't be rebought.
Well,
Because they've been,
because they're probably on their way out. These politicians that have been in that are older than dirt. I mean, you got some in there that knew George Washington when he was president. I mean, there's some really old people in politics right now, and the problem with
also,
that is that, and this, and not to jump off the topic of like this is why we need term limits and yada yada yada. But the problem is you get stuck with an ideology, and you have these same people in office that have not done anything for many years, and now they're not, and they've made their money. So
sure.
now they're not worried about themselves anymore because they got 2 feet in the grave and they're just waiting to lay down. Now they're worried about their families and their kids' kids, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So they want to continue that chain, and that in itself is an ideology, in my opinion. It, yeah. Anyway, go ahead.
Well, it certainly doesn't help. It certainly doesn't help with maintaining an America first agenda, a traditional American values. I'll just use that phrase, um, agenda. If there's money flying around everywhere, and if you are incentivized to do nothing but try to keep the self-licking ice cream cone going. Um, so let me throw something out.
Okay.
And good friends of mine who lean a little further to the left will go crazy over this one, but I'm like, look, in New Hampshire, if you want to be a representative, fine and good, you run for representative and you get elected. Well, you get a special license plate and $100 a year and a locker inside the state house. That is it. There is zero incentive monetarily, almost zero, zero's incentive monetarily for somebody to run for New Hampshire State House Assembly, right? So you become an assemblyman, you're not making any money,
Right.
you know.
You're doing it because you love the community.
You're doing it. Hopefully, that's the idea. Is you're doing it because you have a burning desire to serve and to try to make things better for your constituency. And so, look at the federal side of it, and we've got people. Joe Biden's a great example. Who's been there 50 plus years, is so disconnected from what normal Americans have to do with have to deal with in the world. Is fabulously corrupt. You know, a congressman or a senator, I can't remember which one, but they make about 170-ish dollars a year is their salary.
Right.
How is it that these people have hundreds of millions of dollars in the bank? You don't do that on 170 grand.
Well, their spouses have these great companies, and those companies just happen to be DoD contracts or contracts for other countries,
pharmaceutical stuff,
and they're
right?
just making it. And then they, mind you, being a politician, you're excluded from what goes on in the stock market. And when I say excluded, that means you can do all the insider trading you want.
Yeah.
And you won't get in trouble for it. Now, if
Right.
that doesn't, okay, yeah, I'm going to stop right there.
Well, so that kind of, that gets into sort of what we were going to thrust into was, we got this woke ideology that has infected the country from top to bottom. Education, it's infected corporate America now, which, oh, by the way, is now acting as they are pseudo state actors now when it comes to enforcing, doing things that the government can't. So the corporations are they're enforcing censorship, like what happens on social media.
Right.
They're enforcing censorship inside of corporations through the HR department. They're enforcing vaccine mandates through the HR departments.
Right.
And so corporate America is infected with this woke ideology. I'm sure one hand is definitely washing the other there, but because why would a company like, I don't know, Coca-Cola, or name the other large corporation, Bank of America, why would they do something that was going to harm the country? And I don't pretend to know the answer to that, other than they are simply hitching their horse to the wagon they think is going to win ultimately. But yeah, this is kind of delving into,
that
what's going to happen here. What can we anticipate from the woke left, if the ideology is not defeated by what I call normal Americans? But there's fewer and fewer normal Americans.
this is really.
Although,
Go
well,
ahead.
I was talking to one of our girls about that this past weekend. I saw a really good lecture, or actually, it was a podcast, a discussion on how the universities are committing suicide, or have committed suicide, through all this crazy gender studies stuff, and basically the humanities have been destroyed by the woke left. They have zero credibility, and the universities are losing credibility. It's kind of like the left wing media. People just don't believe anything.
But if do you think they're doing that on purpose?
Well, it was certainly on purpose. Yeah.
Here's why they're doing it. Here's my theory of them doing it on purpose. They're trying to, and whoever they are, the government, people that are running the government, people who are running the people who are in our government. You have to take it. We mentioned this in another show. This is a psyop, right? And you have to pick certain things and start breaking those things down. We're breaking down the American education system. It's been horrible at a much lower level. I'm not talking like elementary and high school level already, right? Some schools are just really bad. Now you go post-secondary education, you get into the college, your community colleges, your colleges and your universities, and you start breaking them down. How do you break them down? You put people with this woke ideology in as instructors, whether they're in the classroom face-to-face. Now, online schools are great. They've made it convenient. University of Phoenix started online schools back in 1989, and they've made it very convenient. Now, everybody in the country, all these universities in the country, has some type of online program. You have to. But when they're doing so, they still get these instructors that have this woke ideology, and they push that narrative to,
sure,
and why do they do that? This because the schools come out, and the people who are in charge of the school, where the money? You got to follow the money. I've said this before. I'll say it again. You have to follow the money. You want to know why somebody's ideology is the way that it is? Follow the money. You follow the money, you'll get answers left and right with everything.
Well, but what if let me ask you this, though. Let me ask you this. What if you're a 25-year-old, new college grad, you got a master's in, I don't know, women's studies, and you have a woke ideology, but you don't have a dollar in the bank? How do we follow money on that person? Because that's what a lot of these folks are. A lot of these folks are young.
You're right. They're all young. And I'm honestly, I'm going through this situation myself right now. Yeah. My son doesn't have that woke ideology, fortunately, but we're starting to see across America the universities that are changing to that because they want to. I guess they want to be like everybody else with it. They follow those CDC, and they follow the FDAs and all this other stuff, which is. This is getting into a whole nother topic, I think, but and we could probably do this for a show as well. But like, who's really in control?
It does make you wonder. I mean, I think it's a fair point to ask that question. But back to our original point of departure, this is what we're seeing. We're seeing this fundamentalist approach to an ideology, which is being applied. In this case, we're talking about the universities.
Yeah.
Think about it. There's zero discussion.
Right.
The students don't have any power to really argue back against the professors. They are can be branded as having engaged in hate speech or something, and the next thing they know, they're up before some student faculty tribunal, getting accused of all kinds of stuff,
And getting kicked
and,
out of school.
and getting kicked out of school, and this is stuff that has happened. So it's just it's disturbing. If it wasn't real, it would be interesting to observe, but it is real,
What
and stuff like this is happening.
we've talked about ideology, the what, and we've talked about what it is, and we've covered a lot of why we think ideology is what it is. I want to transition into what can we do about it? Like
Right.
what is it? Let me ask: is there something we can do now? Is there something that our listeners right now can do about whether it's don't take our word for it. First off, look up ideology and research it yourself. First and foremost,
Sure.
that's one thing that you can do. But John, what are some things? Is there anything that we can do or the listeners can do about ideology, or try to either change? I don't even know what to say or what to ask at this point.
Well, so I don't. First of all, I don't pretend to have all the answers. I will tell you what I am trying to do through what we're calling Heroes Boot Camp. We're calling it Heroes Boot Camp because America needs heroes,
Yeah.
and America needs everybody to become a hero and to be a warrior and fight. How do you do it? What do you do? Well, I'm getting ready to do a short video on how to get in touch with your congressman and senator, and a few pointers for writing a letter, an email, or something to one of your representatives, so you can actually have a conversation with your representatives. The other piece, like we've talked about, we've hammered on over and over, and you touched on, is make sure you understand why you believe what you believe, so that when you have a conversation with someone who believes the contrary, you are able to articulate your idea as well. And that seems like such a small thing, but if every one of us really understood why we believe what we believe, and then had a conversation with their neighbor or one or two or three other people, and had it in a respectful, had a real conversation, a two-way conversation, who knows, you might be able to turn the tide. I mean, hell, that's how we got here, right? It was by we had outsourced so much of our education and teaching people how to think, that the next thing we know, we wake up and people are thinking that America is a systemically racist country that is bad, and they're embarrassed of the American flag. I mean, it's absolutely crazy, but it's nevertheless, it's where we're at. So we got to have conversations with people, and yeah, if they're a dyed in the wool wokester, they're probably not going to want to have a conversation with you, because that's not the way they operate.
They'll be too one-sided. They're not open-minded about it, and it's sad.
Right. Well, but the other piece I would encourage people to do, and you mentioned educating yourself about the ideology, just a little bit of research to figure out how we got here. And the way we got here was Marxism in the 20th century kind of got polished up a little bit in the postmodernists, which was devised by intellectuals who were teaching in college in the late 50s and into the 60s. And then they started teaching this stuff. And over the several decades that followed, it gained traction in various ways. And all of a sudden, you've got a nihilistic morality. You've got this whole idea of oppressor oppressed that is so widespread today. You've got people, think about this. You've got people living in America, many of them middle-class kids, talking about how they're oppressed because of their skin color. Are you insane? You are in the top 0.01% of human beings in terms of wealth and opportunity in the history of mankind, and you're saying that you're oppressed. Give me a freaking break.
Yeah.
I understand that there's differences. I understand there's the super rich and there's the relatively poor, super poor, what we would call them. Although even those people are rich by global standards and exceedingly rich by historical global standards. Um, so there's very little context for this whole argument of oppressor oppressed. Nevertheless, I would just encourage people to understand that that is the ideology that got us here, in order to recognize it for what it is.
I I don't have anything else on ideology. It really just kind of like John's sitting here. Those of you that watch this video or whatnot, my blood pressure is boiling right now. Just because I hear the word ideology and I want to throw punch somebody. It's I say that joking. No, I don't. I'm
Well,
sorry.
it's unfortunate. And back to the fundamentalist idea that we initially talked about. What's really unfortunate is how difficult it is to have a conversation with somebody who disagrees.
And that blows my mind because I really look forward to having conversations with people that I don't necessarily agree with, because I guess I'm just like, oh, I learned something. Like, okay, I see why they feel the way that they feel, or they think the way that they think. I don't agree with it, but I have more respect for the person individually because I've listened to that. And because of that respect, that gives us something to work on, to find our way into the middle of stuff. But the problem is
Yes.
you don't have that. You don't have anybody. We've lost complete respect for one another as human beings, in my opinion. We don't have.
Interesting, in a time of such mass communication, the ability to communicate
Oh
has never
God,
been better.
it's
And yet
so
we
easy.
communicate
Well,
less.
look, take us for an example.
Yeah.
Literally on opposite ends of the world, and we're
Yep.
having this conversation.
Yep.
It's technology. There's a lot of good, and some bad, but it can be very good, especially if you use it for good. And that's a big thing. Why John and I thought this was important when we first started this series. Let's have a conversation a couple months ago now. We started this off. It was like, all right, we'll probably do 3, 4, maybe 5 episodes of Let's Have a Conversation. This one marks number 8 when this pops out, and we're already talking about adding on to more, and it's just a lot of it is decision making. As we're wrapping this up, I want to remind everybody the show is called The Decision Hour, and we have to make that decision to sit down and have these conversations, tough conversations. Not all the conversations that John and I we haven't agreed on everything. We're still friends. We certainly have agreed that we don't know everything. And the reason why John and I, we made the decision to sit down so we could show you and encourage you to have these tough conversations with people in your community, with your neighbor, with your person down the street, with your politicians, and at the city council, town council, whatever, state. But it starts with you. It starts with you. You have to make that decision. If you want to see us change, John, a lot of people say, well, it's the elections or this or that, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, I thought about voting, but I didn't. And, because what can I do? We're telling you. We've been telling you this shit we've been telling you this for literally months now, folks. You can make a change. You just have to make the decision. And it starts by making that decision to have these conversations. It's that simple. John, parting words.
I think that was a fantastic way to leave it. Have the conversations, do what you can, do your little part America is made up of 350 or 60 million little individual parts. Everybody's got to pick up their part of the load, and we got to try to clean up this mess. And part of it is having conversations and opening up dialogue again.
I love it. You know, one of the things here that we do at the Decision Hour and through Heroes Media Group is we like to recognize veteran-owned businesses here. And we got a veteran-owned business here today. John, tell us about your business.
Semper Savage is veteran-owned and family operated, making the finest marinades and dressings on the planet. Pick yourself up a Battle Buddy 2-pack or a Fire Team 4-pack today at www.sempersavage.com. It's homemade flavor in a bottle, and you are gonna love it.
Thank you, John. And I concur with everything that John just said. It will make your taste buds dance. All the flavors are amazing. Absolutely love them. That's all the time that we have, folks. Before we let you go, check out Semper Savage. Also go to Heroes Media Group, our parent network. Check out all the podcasts, articles, and sponsors of the network over there. Simply go into www.heroesmediagroup.com. For John, I'm Adam. Till next time, you've been listening to The Decision Hour.